I'm Donald Rogers. Was a faculty member. I was hired to come to Eastern to teach 7th and 8th grade math and science in the laboratory school in 1963. I taught there till it closed, and I was very happy there. I wish it's still in existence. Closed in '74. The history of the lab school is, I'm more familiar with Buzzard Lab School, which was in the Buzzard building. The Buzzard building was new, I think, in '58. I had interviewed here for a job in '58 from Syracuse University. And when I came here, the job didn't pan out, but then Dr. Marigis they didn't call him dean then. He was just the head of the lab school and that part of the education. The lab school's purpose was basically to do innovative things with children from actually kindergarten, K4. We had a 4-year-old kindergarten and a 5-year-old kindergarten, and then it went first through 9th grade. With about 24 students in 2 lanes. In other words, there was 24 in one lane and 24 on the other side of the elementary part of the school. They had the 4 o'clock kindergarten, or the 4-year-old kindergarten only went half a day, so they had some in the morning and some in the afternoon. They got about 20, I think, in that. And then the 5-year-old kindergarten went some in the morning and some in the afternoon. They had 2 different teachers for them, and they worked that way. From the 1st grade on, they had 2 teachers in each grade, up through the 9th grade. And then when you got into the 7th grade, there were 4 teachers, plus there were also special teachers. There was at least 2 art teachers, home ec teacher, a French language teacher, and several music teachers. There was a band, an orchestra, and I think 2 or 3 in vocal music at the time that I came here. And then in 1968, I went to the University of Nebraska and got my doctorate in education, and then came back in '70 and then taught till it closed. So that's where I spent my time. I think the most important thing about the lab school was the opportunity to try new things and to try them. You could try them on one side and not on the other, or you could allow a person to do different things. The 2nd grade brought in what they called the Sullivan Reading Program, which was absolutely new at that time, which was self-paced. And my theory of teaching in the junior high, 7th and 8th grade, was to allow students to advance at their own rate. I never held math students back, for example. I had math students go all the way to calculus before they got out of the lab school, and never took a course at the high school in math because they didn't have anything that they hadn't already had. It was more of an individualized, and the thing that I really enjoyed the most was the kids and what they did. I call them kids, I still do, but it was so good to have individuals with, well, I think the most important thing about it, and the thing I remember most, is most of the young boys and girls that were here were allowed to progress at their own rate and do their own thing as long as they didn't interfere with other people. And then what I have enjoyed the most is the achievement of some of my former students. I know you interviewed some of them, but my two ones that well, I shouldn't say this, I'm proud of all of them. But to mention a couple, I have one that was at the Goddard Space Center that worked on the Hubble and several other astrophysics projects with NASA. And then I have one that was in my 7th and 8th grade that is now with the Jet Propulsion Lab at in California, and he is involved every time you land or take off in an airplane. He's involved with the safety factor of making it better with GPS and such. He's an expert on space, ultraviolet, and the damage that it does to GPS. He's tried to correct it down to less than 6 inches, and that way you can land planes and take off. And to spend an hour and a half with him this last time was very special to me, because he came over to visit me. The school itself was wonderful. And that's not it. Those two are not the most, well, maybe to me are the most outstanding, but we've got students that graduated from there. We're head of the Menninger Foundation. We've got the mayor of this town went there. Several of the lawyers here in town went there. And so I'm very proud of the fact that I had something to do with some of these young people. And I didn't get to talk to all of them that I knew, and that was kind of the shock. There was too many during it, but the ones I did get to talk to and visit with was very interesting, and I enjoyed that very much. And I guess the important thing, it was the students. I remember them so fondly. I can tell stories about half of them. And some of them are good, and some of them aren't so good. But I had a great time teaching at the lab school. I think the most important, I've got one thing here I would like to just mention again. I think we tried to make all of them feel successful. And that's pretty hard to do, because that was before we had special ed. We had kids that couldn't hardly record from one page to another, that we worked with and was integrated into the classroom. So we had children at all levels of ability, but we tried very hard to keep from making them feel they were failures. And I know a couple of those were at the reunion, and it was very nice to talk to them too. They had very severe learning problems, but it was very nice to talk to them, because they were pretty successful too. And that's very important to me. Well, I've had several of them tell me that to this day, they still use some of the things that I used with them in the science class. I know one, she didn't even come, but she contacted me on Facebook and said, "You remember when we classified rocks?" She says, "I still use that demonstration that you used on us when I work with the kids in the class where I work, which I find kind of interesting that they find some of the things we did that involved for them. It was very interesting to work with some of these. At the last 3 years, I introduced a new science program that was hands-on, self-paced, and I had people get into it that would just not do very much, but did what they did very well. And one of those is an MD today, but she just wanted to work. She was a perfectionist, and she wanted to get everything perfect, and so she'd just go her own rate, which is kind of frustrating to some teachers, but with the system that I was using, I could allow that. And I found that, and they found that very interesting, because usually you had to hand things in and get things done, but this they could do. And I don't think it ruined their ability to do science, because science is more of a process than it is learning. If you have the process, you can do almost any science. And she definitely had the process. She had it down pat. And then one other incident I'll tell, because these two girls had never been allowed to do any mechanical things. And we had an experiment with nuts and bolts. And those girls spent at least 2 lab periods screwing nuts on bolts and taking them off. And most people would find that a waste of time, but if you've never done it, it's an intriguing thing, and it is a lever. It's the most commonly used lever in physics, is a screw. And they enjoyed that so much. I kidded them when they were here, because they were both here. And they said, that was fascinating, because nobody had ever let us do that. And that's what we tried to do more than anything else at the lab school. As you can tell, I was very enthusiastic about teaching there and working with the young men and women that were there.